you, and thank you for having me here. As our illustrious chairperson said, I am currently a practitioner, a writer, and I'd like to speak to you today, a bitter and twisted writer, I've put in my notes, but who still loves TV with passion, and I'd like to speak to you today about when good nostalgia goes bad. And I'm going to start with a list of television shows, and let's see if you can spot what joins them together. Doctor Who, Upstairs Downstairs, Battlestar Galactica, Knight Rider, Beverly Hills 90210, Charlie's Angels, Hawaii Five-O, Dallas, Wonder Woman v Star Trek, Murder, She Wrote, Charmed, Ironside, Dr. Kildare, Roots, Dragnet, The Twilight Zone, Bionic Woman, Melrose Place, Bewitched, Highway to Heaven, The Odd Couple, Tales from the Dark Side, Remington Steele, Falcon Crest, Fame, and Wonder Woman. What joins these shows together is they are all currently, or they are attempting to be rebooted, a word that puts the fear of God into writers these days. The television industry at the moment is obsessed with nostalgia and obsessed with finding old material that they can inject some life into, not always successfully. Two of the shows in which I mentioned are being rebooted for a second time. Wonder Woman failed dismally 2 years ago. They're having another pop at it, partly due to the Marvel studio behemoth that must make DC as well, must make Wonder Woman work. And Star Trek, post the J.J. Abrams reboot of the old series, not really taking in the new series, is being rebooted. Again, I'm not sure whether that's a reboot of a reboot of a reboot. Obviously, there's always been a conversation between television and film where things have ended up on the screen. It's never been more. Nostalgia is on the cinema screen and on the television screen. And in fact, two more adaptations of not what I would consider nostalgic film movies are currently being adapted for television. They're having another pop at the Terminator after Sarah Connor Chronicles. Terminator's been made as a TV show. And I personally, and this is going to sound like a moaning writer, and that's exactly what I am, I've had a show downturned very recently after a great deal of interest from Sky and the BBC and ITV. It was an original show that I'd developed, and the excuse, the reason, the note that came back in the end was it wasn't a recognisable property. And this is my concern about nostalgia at the moment in television, that are we foregoing original television, new ideas that Dennis Potter would certainly have championed in favour of nostalgia. It's interesting because there's also, in the shows that Ken mentioned, the great big list, 50 greatest TV shows, 50 greatest TV cooks, best moments in television. There's often a discussion about the physical act of watching television. You can't talk about Doctor Who without talking about watching it from behind the sofa. My personal physical sense memory of watching television is watching Big Daddy and Giant Haystacks go at it whilst fighting the same battle with my brother. The other one is eating fish fingers in front of the telly, watching Monkey, the Chinese television programme. And recently I did actually treat myself to Monkey on DVD. And I sat down with a plate of fish fingers to watch it. It wasn't as good as I remember. And I think that may be some of the problem with a little bit of the nostalgia that's going on. Obviously, some shows have been massively successful, and Doctor Who, I think, is the best example of it. But I wonder how many of those shows don't quite meet that sense memory we have as a childhood. Knight Rider was one of mine. Fame, certainly. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now if it wasn't for the TV show Fame. I'm now loath to watch these reboots because they're never quite as good as the original. But there's no reason why we can't go over material as long as it's better, not just a reboot. And there's no lack of opportunities to watch the old material. People are actually writing to the BBC now to ask for things to be repeated. It used to be that the green ink letters used to come in saying there were too many repeats, but now they're asking for specific things to be shown on television because they're not getting shown on Dave or Gold, or UK Gold as it used to be known. And those channels, those nostalgia channels, now trumpet their latest acquisitions as if they're new material, which for some section of the audience, they probably are. For some section of the audience, it is new and it's not nostalgia. But personally, I couldn't sit through another Dad's Army repeat. And the reality about these reboots, and what is weird about this Hollywood and increasingly British television obsession with them, is not many of them are terribly successful. Most of them don't get past their first season. Charlie's Angels, Dragnet, Knight Rider, Bionic Woman and Ironside all failed dismally in America. And in this country, Upstairs Downstairs was supposed to be a huge hit for the BBC. It was trumpeted in the press. They spent quite a bit of money on publicising it on their own channels. It didn't do very well. I would suggest because we didn't have that same sense memory of sitting down to something that was beautiful. Keeley Hawes looked amazing in it. They'd spent a lot of money on it. They'd built a gorgeous set. It looked great. The writing was good, but it just wasn't that warm, cuddly, upstairs, downstairs, compelling experience that many of us had had in the 70s. And actually, for people who hadn't watched it, maybe it felt a little bit irrelevant. Ironside's an interesting case in point. When they remade it in America, they cast Blair Underwood, the LA Law actor, very a distinguished actor in America. So finally they'd, if you'll pardon the phrase, put the black man in the chair instead of pushing the chair. That is one positive aspect that I have noticed from reboots, is that they do reflect a 21st century sensibility when it comes to casting, and I'm sort of hoping that that's a positive move. They flip the gender of characters, Starbuck in Battlestar Galactica. There is a concern for me, however, that this is just geeky tokenism, because one of the first discussions that happens amongst the fans of a show when we hear it's being rebooted is who's going to play what, and there are plenty online fancy casting games for the various characters that we know are about to make it onto the screen. And in fact, they announced the casting for most of the Marvel films before they announced anything else. I understand James Spader is going to be in The Age of Ultron. My concern, and what worries me about this obsession with nostalgia on television at the moment, is that new material will not be developed. And where will the nostalgia come in 20 years' time? Will we just be nostalgic about things that we're nostalgic about? Yeah, and it feels like a bit of a loop in the time-space continuum for me. Or am I just being precious? Is this just the new literature? Every generation has their screen adaptations of their literary classics. Your Hamlet could be Laurence Olivier, Mel Gibson or David Tennant. Your Romeo could be Leonardo DiCaprio or Douglas Booth from the most recent incarnation of it. You'd have to be deaf and blind if that was the case. But who is your Bond? Who is your Batman? Who is your Doctor Who? Who is your Sherlock? I think that's possibly a question that we'll continue to ask ourselves. Still, I cannot shake the feeling that TV is eating itself, and nostalgia is actually becoming a demographically targeted commodity. Thank you.